I always imagined that if my marriage ever fell apart, it would be because of some dramatic explosion, an undeniable earth-shattering moment. But the truth slipped in quietly, unnoticed at first. It all began with a fever. Initially, I dismissed it, blaming stress from work and restless nights, but by the third day, the symptoms were impossible to ignore. My body ached, my head throbbed, and a persistent burning pain settled in my stomach, refusing to fade. I pushed through, convincing myself I could function as usual, until I nearly collapsed in the shower. That was the moment I stopped pretending. That morning, Emily hovered around me, her concern oddly exaggerated. She handed me medicine, spoke in soft reassurances, and pressed the back of her hand against my forehead like I was a child. "You probably caught a bug," she said, her voice holding an unnatural, nervous energy. "Maybe something you ate?" Normally, Emily wasn't the doting type. If I had a cold, she'd tell me to shake it off. But now? She was practically forcing pills into my hand, insisting I rest. I wanted to believe her. But as the days passed and my condition didn't improve, I finally made an appointment with the doctor. I expected a simple diagnosis, maybe the flu, maybe something I could treat with antibiotics. Instead, the doctor's words turned my blood to ice. "You have an STI," he said, as casually as if discussing the weather. I stared at him. "That's not possible. I've been married for 8 years. I haven't—" My voice trailed off as he gave me a knowing look. "I'd suggest having a conversation with your wife." My heart pounded against my ribs. This had to be a mistake. Maybe I picked up something from a gym towel. Maybe the lab mixed up the results. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Driving home, my grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. Each stoplight dragged on endlessly. Each turn felt surreal. When I finally pulled into the driveway, our house stood before me, familiar, unchanged. But I saw it differently now. Inside, Emily sat curled on the couch, a book in her lap, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She greeted me with an easy, practiced smile, the kind that used to make me feel lucky. "Hey, feeling any better?" she asked. I watched her carefully. Her smile faltered slightly. "Daniel, what's wrong?" How was I supposed to answer? That my doctor had confirmed the gnawing suspicion in my gut? That the woman I had loved and been faithful to for 8 years hadn't done the same? I couldn't say it. Not yet. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." She nodded, returning to her book as if nothing had shifted between us. But for the first time in years, I looked at her and saw a stranger. That night, I lay awake beside her, replaying moments I had ignored. The sudden exhaustion, the late-night texts, the growing enthusiasm for girls' nights. And then, weeks ago, she had laughed a little too hard when I jokingly asked if her new coworker Mark was attractive. I had thought nothing of it at the time. Now, I wasn't so sure. I turned my head, watching her breathe evenly in her sleep. I wanted to shake her awake, demand the truth. But I knew if she had already lied this much, she wouldn't stop now. I needed proof. So I waited. I observed. Over the next few weeks, I paid attention to every detail, every late-night phone call, every glance at her screen, every carefully worded response. Then one evening, I planted a seed. "You seem stressed," I said over dinner, "and maybe you should take a trip, visit your sister. A break might be good for you." She hesitated just for a second before smiling. "You know what? That actually sounds nice." And just like that, she was gone. For 3 weeks, I had the house to myself. I spent that time searching, phone records, emails, messages. She had been cautious, but not perfect. Then I found it. An email buried in her trash folder. A message she forgot to delete. "Are you sure he won't find out?" The sender? Mark? Not a random stranger, not a fleeting mistake. Mark, my best friend. I reread the message, hoping I was misunderstanding, but there was no doubt. This wasn't just infidelity, this was a betrayal on every level. Closing the laptop, I exhaled slowly. I had my proof. Now, I needed a plan. 3 weeks later, Emily returned, practically glowing. There was a new lightness in her step, a brightness in her eyes. The moment she stepped inside, I felt the shift. And then she said the words that sealed her fate. "Daniel," she beamed, practically vibrating with excitement. "I have the most amazing news." I already knew what she was going to say before she did. "I'm pregnant." Silence stretched between us. She waited, watching for my reaction. I smiled. hugged her, told her exactly what she wanted to hear, because I already knew the truth. She had been gone for 3 weeks, and I hadn't touched her in far longer than that. That baby wasn't mine, but she wanted me to believe it was. For the next few days, she floated through the house in a daze of happiness, telling everyone, the story growing more elaborate each time. "It's like a miracle," she gushed. "A miracle." Right. I played my role perfectly. I nodded, held her hand, whispered sweet reassurances, but beneath it all, I was planning. That night, as Emily slept, I returned to her laptop. She had been careful, but not careful enough. In an archived folder, another message from Mark waited for me. "I can't wait to see you again. You have no idea what you do to me." My hands clenched into fists as my pulse pounded. There it was, the final nail in the coffin. I checked our phone records, hundreds of texts, hours of late-night calls. I should have been angry. I should have wanted to destroy something. But all I felt was cold, calculated certainty. I knew exactly what I had to do. But instead I felt nothing. No rage, no sadness, just cold, absolute clarity. Mark wasn't just a one-time mistake. He was the other man, and he needed to know that I knew. I thought about calling him right then and there, letting the anger take over, demanding answers. But that wasn't the way to handle this. No, if I was going to do this, I needed to be smart. So I did the one thing I knew neither of them expected. I sent Mark an email. It was short, to the point. "We need to talk, just you and me. Tomorrow night. Your place." Then I hit send and waited. It didn't take long for him to respond. "Daniel, what's going on? Everything okay?" I almost laughed. "Everything okay," I typed back. "Just need to clear some things up. See you at 8. He didn't question it after that. And the next night I found myself standing outside his apartment, ready to watch his entire world crumble. I stood outside Mark's apartment door, my heartbeat steady, my fists unclenched. I wasn't here to yell. I wasn't here to throw punches or demand explanations. No, I had something better planned, and I knocked twice. A few seconds later, the door creaked open, and there he was. Mark Clark, my best friend. The man I had trusted with everything. For a second, he looked genuinely happy to see me. Fake. "Hey, man," he said, grinning like we were just two buddies getting together for a beer. "Everything good?" I nodded, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His apartment was the same as always, minimalist, slightly messy, the faint scent of whatever cologne he drowned himself in lingering in the air. I glanced around. No signs of Emily, but I wasn't expecting any. She was home, sitting on our couch, probably texting him, unaware that I was here. "Take a seat," he said, motioning to the couch. I didn't sit. Instead, I turned to face him, my expression unreadable. "I know." 2 words, that's all it took. His entire face changed in an instant. The fake grin dropped. His body stiffened. His eyes darted toward the door like a trapped animal looking for an escape. "No what?" he asked, his voice a little too casual. I let the silence drag out just long enough to make him sweat. "I'll know about you and Emily." There it was. The truth laid out between us like a loaded gun. Mark swallowed hard, shifting on his feet. "Daniel, I don't lie to me," I interrupted, my voice dangerously calm. He opened his mouth and closed it again, running a hand through his hair. It wasn't serious." I cut him off. "It was a mistake. It just happened." He flinched like I had hit him. "Daniel, listen." "No, you listen," I said, stepping closer. "I don't want excuses. I don't want apologies. I don't even want an explanation. I just want you to understand one thing." I let the words sink in before I said them. "You were never her first choice." His face paled. "What?" "You heard me," I said. "You were just an escape, a distraction, a mistake she thought she could hide. But you were never the man she actually wanted." His jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. He wanted to argue, to fight back, to deny it. But he couldn't because he knew I was right. I watched the realization hit him in waves. He thought he had won something, thought he had taken something from me. But in reality, Emily had played him just as much as she had played me. "She's pregnant, Mark," I said, watching his reaction carefully. His eyes snapped up to mine, wide with shock. "What?" "Yeah, and guess what?" I let out a humorless chuckle. "It's not mine." He looked like he might be sick. Daniel, I didn't let him finish. You get to live with that now, I said. Knowing she only came to you when she was bored. Knowing she still came home to me every night. Knowing that, even now, she's still lying to you. He staggered back like the words had physically hit him. He started, but there was nothing left to say. I turned and walked toward the door, pausing only once. You're pathetic, Mark, I said, my voice eerily calm, and you deserve whatever comes next. Then I walked out, leaving him alone in the ruins of his own choices. I wasn't done yet. Emily was next, and this time I was going to make sure she had nowhere to run. When I got home that night, Emily was waiting for me on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I walked in, her face lighting up with that same easy smile, the one I used to love. Hey, babe, she said, her voice full of warmth. Where did you go? I smiled back. Just needed some air. I had just come from ripping her boyfriend's world apart, but she had no idea. Not yet. She patted the cushion beside her. Come sit with me. I did. I wrapped an arm around her, pulled her close. She rested her head against my shoulder, sighing contentedly. If she only knew. I was thinking, I murmured, running my fingers through her hair. We should take a trip, just the two of us. She lifted her head, surprised. A trip? Yeah, I said, keeping my voice smooth, casual. Somewhere private, a cabin maybe, just us. No distractions. I want to start fresh, Emily. Put everything behind us. She bit her lip as if considering, then smiled. That sounds amazing. Of course it did. She thought she had won. Thought I had accepted the baby as mine. Thought I was just another clueless, loyal husband desperate to hold his marriage together. She had no idea that I was already gone. Over the next week I planned everything. I booked a remote cabin, something picturesque. Something that screamed romance and reconciliation. I made reservations at a fancy restaurant in town. Something that would make her feel safe, like she had me wrapped around her finger again. And I made sure, absolutely sure, that the trap was set perfectly. She had no idea I'd already filed for divorce. No idea that I had been gathering evidence for weeks. No idea that everything was about to come crashing down around her. I played my part perfectly. I held her at night, whispered about our future, let her believe I was hers, body and soul. And then, when the weekend finally arrived, I packed our bags, loaded up the car, and drove her straight into the fire. Because by the time we left that cabin, Emily's world would never be the same again, and neither would mine.